And West Indies now have beaten England in both the ODI and T20 series. England have lost every single T20 series this year. Is this the end of the England domination in white ball cricket, or is this merely a blip? Welcome to the shiny side. I'm your host Fareed Shah, and for the first time on the show, we have Robin Butler with us. How are you doing, Robin?
I'm very well, Fareed. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Robin is, well, he's a big cricket fan. He's based in England, supports Team England, has strong views on everything in the game, from the future of Test cricket to some very specific views about the pitch in Pindi last year, which we served up to England. And he's live with us today from a coldish or not so cold morning in London. So thank you for joining.
Let's say sort of damp and slightly cold.
Yeah. So standard. But I guess before getting into the thick of things, English has just finished a tour of the West Indies. So what's I guess your high level sentiment at this point?
I don't know. It depends on whether you view the last, I guess, sort of I don't know, from like 2015 onwards as being like the norm for English white ball cricket. Because if anything, if you look further back, that was the anomaly where we were actually quite good.
Yeah.
For a very long time, white ball cricket in England has been a sort of a litany of failures and maybe a lack of focus or lack of care, lack of attention. So it depends whether you want to benchmark yourself against what was like undoubtedly an incredible period with a pretty phenomenal group of players playing very well as a team, like well balanced as a team, and now kind of feels like those players are not sort of past it. Like a lot of them are just a bit older. The team dynamics maybe don't balance as well, and so you're rebuilding. So you're like, well, yeah. Okay, then if you look at it as that, and your benchmark is not the sort of six or 7 years, then I'm not totally despondent.
Yeah, I guess it's hard. We don't know the answer to this question, but it's definitely a question now, the one you raised, right? Where was that the blip, or is this the blip? But I guess before we get into it, so we will be talking about, at the end of the show, we'll talk about the test squad that's been announced for India. We'll also get into the series itself, right? But I think before we get started, I think let's take a step back and look at, again, where English white ball cricket is as overall. England has won 19 of the last 41 T20s they played. If you take out the T20 World Cup, which again is like saying take out the most important games, I get it. But they only won 13 out of 35 of the last T20s they played. They've lost every single series this year to Bangladesh, Windies, and on the T20 side, since Morgan's left, they've also lost on the ODI side. Sorry, they've lost 10 out of 20 ODIs. So I guess the question it comes back to again, right? Like what you raised was generally speaking, the view has been England white ball cricket is showing the world the way to play. But all of a sudden, it's like, hang on, is this a blip, or is the era over, right? And there's no clear answer at this point, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure I appreciate the glee with which you recounted those statistics about England's travails in white ball cricket recently. I mean, look, you go back to 2015 and under Morgan and the team that was put together, it kind of, I guess, sort of redefined or sort of set about a new way that you could play white ball cricket, and it was new, it was exciting, it was something that very like other people struggled to sort of play against and deal with. But then, like, obviously everyone else watches what's happening, and they learn, they adapt, they improve. And I don't know, why it's a comparison that comes to mind, but you remember like the sort of the Spain team, football team with like Xavi and Iniesta and those guys, like the football they used to play, no one else could, like, they were totally untouchable, and everyone else just like figures out either how to play in a similar fashion or how to nullify the kind of the threat and the skill that you have on show. And it's like the same thing with England. Like everyone else has probably improved their game and or figured out ways that you can kind of nullify that threat. So it's maybe like you say, well, England, were they to play kind of how they were playing today back in 2015, 2016, build up to the World Cup, maybe they would be having similar levels of success, but the game's moved on, and it sort of feels like, I don't know, particularly this summer with the Ashes and kind of Test cricket getting being revitalized under Stokes and the team there, that actually kind of the focus has maybe switched a bit. Sure. Like up to 2019, it was only thing England cared about was white ball cricket,
especially ODI, and then leading up to that World Cup. But I guess that's a good segue, right? Because I want to quickly speak. And by the way, those of you watching, if you have a view on this, whether you think the white ball era is over, if this is a blip, please leave a comment and let us know. But I just want to quickly touch upon the ODI World Cup, right? Because you obviously haven't been on the show before. In your view, what went wrong for England? There's lots of people say a lot of things out there. What went wrong for, like, in short, I guess?
I think the balance of the team, and it's, you don't want to come down to sort of one individual, but like the sort of England team when it was at its best, I think the kind of the balance between batting and bowling was sort of very clear, and roles were well defined. And I think Stokes as the all-rounder kind of brought it all together, and him playing just as a batsman, like, I mean, clearly the guy has a sort of a character, a charisma that really brings the team together. You've seen it in Test match cricket. You see him kind of being brought back into playing the ODI. But when he's not there, able to kind of shoulder some of the load with the bowling, not to pin it all on one thing, but you slightly imbalance the team, and then I don't know, you have an injury in one game. It was Topley getting injured in one of the games. You lose that sort of thing, and it's momentum, it's confidence, it's sort of, I think, slightly thinking, well, this is kind of what won it for us last time, so let's see if it'll work again in very different conditions, in a very different dynamic.
I mean, a lot of stuff has been said, right? So a lot of views on how England stopped playing tier one domestic 50-over cricket 4 years ago. And they have a competition, but overlaps with the 100. So none of the tier one players are really playing that tournament. In my view, it's probably maybe too soon for that to have an impact. That'll probably affect 50-over cricket going down. But I think a bigger factor for me was that the fact that because of the focus on Test cricket, the white ball guys never really got the tier one team to play leading up to the World Cup. So they hadn't really played together. And you might argue that for the T20 World Cup, they did the same thing. But the key difference there is they may not have played with each other, but they play so much T20 cricket in these leagues that they are very familiar with the T20 game. But these guys who played the World Cup barely played any 50-over cricket over the last 4 years, right? Because they didn't have to show up for England. They don't play at a domestic level. So I think that probably for me was a big factor. I'm not sure what your view is.
Yeah, I think it is a big factor. And it's kind of like, I think it's probably a trend, is like, I don't know, you have a lot of cricket being played today, a lot of kind of T20 cricket. It feels like basically a World Cup every year, which is kind of totally insane that you would have so many. And I know it isn't, but it's sort of, you kind of have the feeling of that dynamic. And I'm sort of curious where in the longer term the 50-over game fits in. Like your T20, even from a kind of as a product, as a spectator, is your go and watch it after work. On the weekend, you maybe have a couple of games back to back. I think what's worked really well in the UK with the 100 is having sort of women's and men's games on the same day, so that people go and watch both. But 50-over cricket, I don't know. Depends who you ask on why so many of the grounds were empty in India. Supposedly, kind of the ticketing system wasn't set up properly, and it was all last minute. But it's a reality. Like when stuff has to sort of start at lunchtime, that a lot of people can't go, and so the kind of interest wanes. Whereas Test cricket sits at the other end of the spectrum, where like you're consciously taking a whole day off, and I think it's like value for money for high level sport. A ticket to the Test cricket is incredibly good value for the day that you get. I just don't really know where 50-over cricket sits in that dynamic.
And I almost feel like Test cricket is like watching a show where you kind of get sucked in over a period of time, and you may go in deep in the middle. It's a bit like that. So it's over 5 days. You kind of loosely involved throughout, but then there's specific points where you're watching on TV, and you may go in for a day or two, right? So it's a bit more of a journey as opposed to, I guess, ODI, which is about 7 hours. If if I had a busy day, then I kind of missed it and it's done. So yeah, I guess. And just one last question before we move on from, I guess, to talk about the series itself is, where do you sit on the leadership structure within English white ball cricket with Butler and Mott? Specifically, look, I get it's the hardest job in the world to be captain after Morgan was captain, right? But I think Mott was also appointed as captain, perhaps keeping in mind that Morgan would be Mott was appointed as coach, keeping in mind that Morgan would be his ally as captain. And I feel like that dynamic is probably very different from Butler and Mott. So do you feel like they have the right two guys in charge in your view?
I mean, you could go off kind of sentiment, and I don't know. I'm not sitting in the room and hearing what's going on, but you go off results, and it seems like something's not working, and you can look, like we've spoken about, the balance of the team and the players maybe aging, but maybe there is something between the kind of coach captain relationship. And it's then that question of like, well, should you, if you say that, okay, this coach was appointed to sort of work with a specific captain, if that captain goes, should you also like, should the coach then have freedom to appoint who they want? It's, yeah, as you say, it's close to impossible following Morgan as England captain. And yeah, you probably want a kind of period of rebuilding, but then it's like, who wants to take on this being the 50 over captain at a time when things aren't going so well and everyone's focus is elsewhere.
Yeah. Okay, for those of you watching, if you like what we're talking about, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. But moving on to the England-West Indies T20 series. So West Indies won the first two games. England won the next two, some good performances there, but then West Indies wrapped it up last night and won it 3-2. So what stood out for you in the series?
I mean, Salt getting back-to-back hundreds at the top of the order. I mean, that's pretty unheard of in T20. Like, you look at the sort of probability of I don't know, getting past 40, 50 up to 100 is incredibly low. So to do it back-to-back, I think really stands out. It's the way kind of, I don't know, I think a lot of teams play T20, and I think particularly the English team sometimes feels like it's like, if this goes for us, like, we can win anything, but also if it doesn't quite click at the beginning, like, nah, all right, we'll just sort of move on. Like, there isn't, which is maybe just a function of T20. Like, you have so many games now, international and league, that why would you get so hung up on one game? Whereas like a test match, or even actually 50 over, you're saying, well, we've got time. Like, this isn't over if, I don't know, is it each over in T20 is 5% of what's going on. You have you have four bad overs, and 20% of the game is gone, and you can come back, but it's very difficult and it's very rare. So,
and I think what makes this series quite important is, so they're playing the series in the same country where the T20 World Cup is in 6 months' time. And after this, the only T20 series they have, it's against Pakistan right before the World Cup at home in England. And that's when I think it'll overlap with the IPL. So I imagine a lot of the first choice guys may not even be there for that. So this is essentially, you can say, I mean, they still don't have everybody because there's no Bairstow and a couple of other test guys around. But in terms of some key performances, even though, again, Salt, brilliant 200s, and then one of them coming the day after he was snubbed from the IPL auction where he was left out, making a big statement, but I'm sure he'll get picked up in the supplementary rounds. I thought Brooks' effort, he scored 21 of Andre Russell's last over to win them the third T20. This is after Salt had already scored 100. That was incredible. And the best part was he literally had just come in. So he scored, 31 of 7, right? So a lot of guys can kind of hit at the end, but doing it as soon as you walk in is a special skill entirely.
Yeah, no, I think he's a pretty special talent across all forms of the game. I mean, he clearly just has a phenomenal kind of hand-eye coordination, and seems confident, and is kind of looks like the sort of person that, with sort of the likes of maybe Salt and him and other folks, that you can build maybe the next generation around. And that's like undoubtedly, like, probably the next T20 World Cup is going to come too soon, and you kind of, if you calibrate your expectations, say, let's get some players in there, let's not put all the pressure in the world on them. Obviously we want to win it, and maybe you hit a rich vein of form, and maybe Archer comes back, for instance, and is on form. Maybe Stokes is back bowling again, and you have that kind of balance, and you get a nice mix between the sort of thing that won things back in the day and what might win it in the future. But I wouldn't have crazy expectations, and try and build a team around some of these younger players.
I mean, I guess if I look at the England side right now, right, so I feel like all of a sudden, to me, the batting looks like it's on track, right? Because you have Salt, who's averaging 82 in this series. Butler's had a quietly good series, 32, 250s, averaging 150, strike rate 150. Even Livingston, who didn't have the best T20 World Cup in Australia last year, I feel like these conditions suit him a lot more. He's averaging 40 at 170 strike rate, which is insane, I think, in this format. And Brook, right? So you have these four guys. Throw in Stokes, throw in Bairstow, potentially throw in Milan as well. I mean, they still could be, right. So that's a pretty good mix of the young ones coming in and the solid guys around them. I feel like The bowling is where it's a bit of a question mark, right? So Adil Rashid's the only rock in the middle. Perhaps Stopley's all right. Wood, he's not playing right now, but would be back in. But I think the bowling is where. So how do you see that dynamic at this point?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, and I think it kind of comes back to, not to keep repeating the same point, but if you have a true sort of batting bowling all rounder who's taking some of those overs, taking a little bit of pressure off. And I know it's that thing about Stokes. He just like, so if someone should be just being hit for 30 off and over, he's like, give me the ball. Like, and for a younger player to stand up and do that, I don't know, like if anyone has that sort of that like kind of mentality within the team. But I think without that person to take the pressure off that I think Stokes can be, yeah, the balance isn't quite there. And I mean, Wood is, I mean, the guy can bowl in just an unbelievable pace. And Archer, will he kind of come back in?
Who knows anymore? I mean, with Archer.
Yeah, the big question. And I just remember at the time, like when he was coming through, and it was like he was just being bowled as much as possible in every format of the game. It was like, hang on, this just feels like everyone's like, maybe this is too much, but seems to be okay.
I especially remember this really flat track in New Zealand where Joe Root bowled him to death in some test match, maybe early on. So yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, why sort of ruin clearly what is? I mean, the guy barely looks like he looks like sort of getting out of bed and then bowling it at 95 miles an hour. It is just incredible kind of natural talent and skill. So I agree, the bowling's maybe not quite there. Gus Atkinson, I think looks like he could be quite handy. It's the question with Rashid is he's how much longer he keeps playing for.
I mean, this T20 World Cup, sure, but I don't know how much longer than that.
Yeah, and you don't want him to still sort of. I mean, he'll probably carry on playing some of the franchise cricket around the world, because why not? I mean, you make good money, and it's but on the international side.
I guess what's good for England is, so if you remember the last T20 World Cup, Stokes was bowling an over or two, and because it's T20, given how his knee recovers from the operation he just had, he may be able to, even if he gives you a couple of overs, that's half a bowling quota, right? So I feel like that would really help. And then I guess the other big question is Sam Curran. He was key last year, but he hasn't really been having the best time lately. So I'm not, because he also adds that all-round balance as well, right? So if he can contribute, that would be really good. But just a quick word.
What I'd say is, like, I mean, all of those players are very good players and or have the potential to be good players, but you've got to get them playing well as a team. And I think your point on how much T20 cricket are they going to play together between now and the World Cup? Basically nothing. How are you going to get these guys playing well as a team? Irrespective, you can't expect to have 11 people go out on the pitch and just play well individually. They need the captain to lead them. They need the time together. They need, I mean, coming off this, what's it going to be like? Oh yeah, 6 months ago, you remember how we kind of did quite well in that third one? We chased that big total. Like, let's try and remember how we did that and do it again.
It's hard. But just a quick word on the West Indies, right? So they obviously didn't even qualify for the last ODI World Cup, but they're a better T20 side. It's at home. I think I'd say they look better than they've looked lately. Lots of power in the lineup. Darren Sammy's back in coach. He's obviously, as coach for White Ball, he's won them T20, two T20 World Cups as captain. He's probably somebody who's good at kind of putting the politics of the island aside and getting them all to play under one cause. Andre Russell is back. Somehow still playing 2 years after he last played for the West Indies. So how do you see them shaping up? Do you think they will be in the mix in the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, look, they have home advantage. They seem to be the kind of nation that has sort of gone all in on the kind of franchise cricket around the world, like the players that are
maybe 10 years before the rest of us did. Really.
Yeah. I mean, Gale was what sort of kind of went in full time on it before anyone else was doing it, and so playing probably the most T20 cricket, and sort of counter to what I was saying about England feeling that they probably need to spend more time playing together. The Windies team just seem to, whether it's a cultural thing or just a sort of that they seem to gel quicker and I don't know, home advantage. I was in Barbados last year for the I went to with the England Test tour there, and like you just sort of everyone's having a good time. So I think you'll have that kind of environment for the World Cup. And look, they've done it before. They've got that kind of muscle memory of it, and it's I don't know, unlike England, where we seem to sort of crucify ourselves at the prospect that we might even win, and then when we don't, we sort of do it all again and sort of horrible post-mortems.
Yeah.
It's yeah, the dynamic seems to be different.
Okay, so before we wrap up very quickly, I'm going to put up the test score that England announced for this India tour. So any thoughts, any comments, anyone you were surprised to see or surprised to see left out?
I mean, Bashir is a surprise. I mean, like I like to think I follow cricket reasonably closely, and you're like, I mean, wow, where have you come from, my man? I mean, fair enough on man. Look, I think is that take him along, give him experience being around the squad,
Yeah.
And see how he gets on. I mean, a little bit surprised to see Anderson in there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the kind of everyone has this impression that his numbers aren't as good as India. I think actually the statistics is not as bad as it seems, but like undoubtedly he is better in other
If I can
conditions.
just add there, his record in India is better than Zahir Khan's record in India as a seamer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I take it back, but I still look at like you put him, you get him charging around in India. I mean, it's not an easy place to go and play, and tend to favor maybe spin bowling. So a little bit surprised to see him, but I mean, look, he defies every stereotype about fast bowlers and age and sort of losing it, and just seems. I think it's a little bit that kind of you when you see him bowl, it looks smooth, it looks natural, it looks like it's not putting too much kind of pressure on things, and then you look at some other bowlers who get injured more often, you're like you can kind of see why you can understand why it happens, but no, sort of a bit surprised to see Bashir, but I would be even more surprised to see him play. I'm looking forward to seeing is if Bazball translates to
Yeah, I mean that's the key,
India.
right? How will Bazball play out in India, right? And on Bashir, I mean, I think when Rehan Ahmed was selected after 10 first class games, that was a big deal. Bashir I think, has 10 first class wickets, so it's going the other way around clearly. And as far as the quicks are concerned, there's two guys sitting around 40. But yeah, I think the big question is how does Bazball play out in India, right? I mean, to be honest, it's not like, just to be, in my view, even if England go and do not win, you can't say Bazball failed, because it's not like everybody's screaming India and India anyway, right? No one really beats India. I feel like the last team to beat them may have been maybe England 10 odd years ago with Cook and Peterson, etc., etc. So I'm not sure anyone's beating them since. But yeah, how do you see Bazball playing out in India? What's your?
Well, took Bazball to Pakistan, and as we were talking about the other day, on some pretty flat tracks, managed to eke out results. And I suppose Bazball proved that you could beat some flat tracks and a good Pakistani team. I don't think the Indian wickets will be as much of a road as some of those ones in Pakistan were. So there'll probably be more kind of going on and more of a kind of threat that isn't just sort of the game running out of time and nothing happening. How do I think it'll play out? When we started playing Bazball, I guess my initial thing was like, oh, this is pretty cool, but it'll lose momentum. Like, there's no way we can sustain this. It just seems so high octane, so sort of kind of playing everything at 100 miles an hour. And then we went through the Ashes and did sustain it. And there were a couple of moments, like I was at Edgbaston when Root came dancing down the track to try and hit Lyon for 6 to get to his 50. He'd made everything look so effortless till that point. And then you look at it and it was like, it was so frustrating. Or if he'd scored 80, he'd stayed in, we'd almost certainly have got enough runs and won that game. And it's like little moments like that where Bazball sort of loses itself. And the danger is, you basically win or lose the series depending on how many of those you have and if they go your way or not. So honestly, I guess the answer is I don't know, which is
I guess
intriguing.
India has a tendency to sometimes overthink the pitches and bring the opposition in. So I feel like if I'm India right now, I'm like, okay, which way am I bringing England in? If I go too sprint friendly and then it's like a 250 place 220 game, am I bringing England in because somebody scoring a 60 or 40 could like turn the game for them, or is it going super flat? So I feel like if I was India, I'd also not be quite sure what kind of pitch to make, right? Because India takes that part of the game very seriously as for home test matches, but I'm not sure what the best pitch for them would be for that matter at this point. So that's what makes it interesting in my view.
And that's what Bazball does. It puts people off. They kind of because you don't, as you say, you don't know. It could be a low scoring game and someone could just come in and start swinging from the hip and hit 50, 60. England could be 180 for 8. Someone comes in and has a bit of a swing and you're 250 all out.
Yeah.
But if the pitch, as you say, is a 250
Yeah.
plays 220, that's game one.
Just last question before we wrap up. On the Test series again, Ashes, Chris Wokes, player of the tournament, not selected for the India tour, not barely ruffled any feathers. Your take on that?
Chris Wokes, as far as I can tell, being like the nicest man in the entire world, which certainly looks like it. His record in England is exceptional. His record abroad is not as close, and I think that's kind of the rationale that goes behind it.
I think everyone's kind of comfortable. I think he's okay with that. The team is okay with that, and that's why I said like it barely. But interesting, right? Like that's where we are with Test cricket now, where we can accept someone plays like that. And like you said, I think he has a better record in England than Anderson and Broad. Obviously, it's a very different story abroad. But
yeah,
okay, good stuff, Robin. Thank you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much for having me, Bruce.
And for those of you watching, if you have a view on how you think England will do with Bazball in India, please leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to our channel, and we'll be back in a couple of days with some more content. In the meantime, stay tuned to the shiny side.